Okay, we're going to go and do topic number 2, which all in the same kind of vein. So, what do you say on a mound visit, in a mound visit? And to me, I've written about this before, but it's three main things. So, number one, there's mechanical things. Number two, there's confidence things. Number three, there are strategic things. So I remember during my career, I obviously had tons and tons of mound visits, but there were a couple things that when I was young, when you're young, you have coaches who will yell out there like throw strikes, or I'm pulling you, I'm threatening you. So those things are terrible to do. Number one, to put pressure on someone. Sometimes it is the situation where you go out and say, hey, I'm giving you one more hitter, just give me what you got, and that's a important thing. Sometimes you can say, okay, I'm out of gas, but all I need to do is throw one pitch, throw three pitches. I got one hitter to get, and that's it. Like, it makes it a simple task. They don't feel like they have the rest of it on their shoulders anymore. But in general, when pitching coaches yell to their players, when they threaten them with things, when they make it very obvious that their night's going to be short if they don't do things the right way, it doesn't make it better. It adds pressure. Now, you also have to be honest about the situation. So recently, I told our kids, like, we have a tournament coming up. It's a short tournament. There's a lot of good teams in it. We have to probably win all three of our games to advance. And I said, look, here's the starters, but everyone needs to be ready because I can't have a long leash with you guys this week because we have to probably win all three games to advance. So I need strike throwers, and if you're out there and you're not, I've got to come get you quick. So it's not that I'm trying to add pressure. It's we just all need to have a little bit different mindset. We need to be a little more aggressive with the strike zone, and we need to have that as our primary goal. But when I harp on it with my team, we talk about how did this weekend go? How did this game go? And I always say, I'm like, look, we didn't throw enough strikes. We walked too many hitters. And I know none of you are trying to walk anybody. I never tried to walk a hitter. It's just a thing that happens. So discussing strike throwing is a really weird, often useless topic because, I don't know what there is to say about it a lot of times, except for strategically and mentally, like, we lack confidence. Maybe we haven't put the work in our routine. Maybe we haven't been throwing enough. Maybe we don't have enough bullpens. Maybe it's just too early in the season. It's hard to say why we don't throw strikes sometimes, but bringing up the fact that we don't throw strikes, that we walk too many hitters, I don't have a solution to that. I say, hey guys, like, we walked 8 hitters in our 6-inning game the other day. Not great. Like, we have to throw more strikes than that. Our pitch counts are getting too high. Those extra base runners are going to come back to bite us when we don't slug in 13 runs. But you bring it up, but I don't have a solution for it. I don't have a way to say, okay, we're going to do this, and that's going to help us walk less hitters. So strike throwing is obviously one of the biggest reasons coaches come out for mound visits. So three things again: mechanical, confidence, and strategic. So mechanical, the biggest thing I say when I go out there, I want to give them one thing that is extremely actionable, that is not going to confuse them, that they can do. And typically it's related to their eyes. So almost every problem that I deal with when I'm watching a pitcher is either they're rushing, which means they're not gathering with the weight on their backside long enough, and so they're kind of falling down the mound, and their shoulders are following the downhill tilt, and then they kind of end up pushing the ball, or it goes in the dirt or whatever. So they're not gathering as much as they normally should. They're not getting that sort of uphill to start their delivery. So that's number one. Or they're starting to fly open. So they're getting, not staying closed well, and they rotate open a little bit. So if you're in podcast land, I just demonstrated that very crudely. So don't worry, you didn't miss much on the audio version of this podcast. But so it's typically they're rushing down the mound, so they're not loading their backside enough. Or they're flying open with their front side, so they're just starting to rotate open a little bit too soon. And typically then there's a third thing, which is kind of a combination. A lot of times they're just not using their front side to kind of pull them downhill and over top of the baseball. And then they kind of push through it, and then they stay up in the zone too much. So those are the big three things that I see happen that get them way off track, that I have to get them to stay back in their back leg longer. They have to make their first move down the mound uphill a little bit more, and that also helps load their back leg better. and then they just need to keep their front side closed. So, okay, those are the things that they need to do, but what do I tell them then to get them to do it? Well, I want them to have one extremely actionable thing that they can do. So you don't have to think about, oh, I need to keep my front side closed. I just tell them, hey, you need to see down your front shoulder as long as you possibly can. You need to see your shoulder in your field of vision longer than you have been. See it, see it, see it, see it. So I'm looking through my elbow as long as I possibly can. If they do that, that will keep them closed. Number two, it's just like, hey, I want you to see your front shoulder go uphill longer. See your front shoulder go uphill. That's number two. Really simple. So they don't have to worry about the mechanical aspect. They just have to, okay, when I start my delivery, I'm going to see my front shoulder up. And then that pretty much takes care of all three of those. And sometimes just like, hey, slow down your backside. Just stay on your backside a little bit longer. Don't move so quick to the plate. And, just a tempo thing. So those are the vast majority. And then sometimes I'll also tell them, hey, you're just pushing through the ball. When you feel that front foot hit, when you start to see yourself go up, you got to tug yourself back down hill a little bit so you can get to the top of the baseball. And then sometimes fatigue-related stuff, if they're getting towards the end of the rope and they're leaving everything up, sometimes their whole backside starts to drag, so they kind of sink on their back leg a little bit, or their arm starts to lag a little bit. And I say, hey, you got to crack the ball, like get it coming out of your glove a little quicker, start moving it up. And I know because I felt those changes myself. Pitch 90 plus, I start to sink into my backside a little bit too much, and then everything goes hill and I can't get on top of the ball. So I start to move my hand through its circle just a hair faster, and that would usually help me just get to the top, kind of feel it again, and then kind of realign myself. So just those really simple, actionable, like do one thing, like feel your backside, feel your weight shift, tug yourself downhill, see down your front shoulder a little bit longer. Those are the things that I try to give them, like just one extremely actionable, simple thing they can do. As far as throwing strikes, I don't want to discuss the strike throwing. I just want to discuss what we can do to get more strikes. And typically, the lack of strikes come from the mechanical stuff we just discussed, or it comes from a lack of confidence. It's those two things. So I don't need to address the strike throwing. I just need to address the confidence or the mechanics, because they will get the strike throwing back. So a lot of times I see pitchers ease off, which I'll cover more when we get to the third little segment of this, but they ease off because now they're a little nervous. They try to guide it, they try to control it, and it makes it vastly worse. You throw your absolute best when you're convicted and everything leaves your hand hard. It's not to say you're overthrowing, because there's a balance, but this is like perfect. This is overthrowing. And then this is, I'm getting a little nervous that I'm not throwing as many strikes as I want. And now everything gets worse. So that finding that set point where I throw everything with just a lot of, that's the kind of the little zone that we try to stay in. And it's hard to stay in that zone. So if you're a coach and you're watching your team pitch, you're watching the other team pitch, watch what happens when they start to fall behind in counts. Watch what happens when they walk a hitter or two, or they start to give up some hits. You'll see the finish they have is different. They don't get that last little bit of the ball, and suddenly it starts dying. So for me as a pitcher, I learned this in my rookie year. I learned to just be just as aggressive as I could, because I didn't have much of an off-speed pitch. I had to get my best version of my fastball on every pitch to like get it in there hard enough to jam a guy or to get it past him. Those are the only ways I got outs. So I learned to get really good at that. And then I also learned like what it looked like when I started to back off. For me, the ball goes in the dirt. If I was a pitcher with high spin and I lived a little more up in the zone, so if I threw fastballs that were down the zone, like hitting the dirt or missing down, almost always it was because I was either mechanically a little bit off, and then I tried to stay close a little longer or whatever, or I was nibbling and I was getting a little bit nervous and I was trying to guide those balls in there. And then because I don't get that last little bit of spin that kind of helps it take off and stay up in the zone, and the last little extra bit of velocity, the ball will die. So it's the difference between getting like great spin and average spin for me. So the great spin, even if I threw them down, they would still stay up in the zone. And it takes a long time to learn what your errors mean and how to then feel through them and make those adjustments. But so again, as a pitching coach, really it's, I think, three things: the mechanical, which you discussed, the confidence. So we talk about like what do I say personally when we go out there? I try to wake them up. Sometimes it's just like, I often badmouth the other team. I do that almost every mound visit. I remind my players that that kid you're pitching against, he stinks. Especially compared to you, that whole team stinks. You destroy this team. You own this team. They don't deserve to be on the field as you, or the same field as you. I mean, it's stuff like that. So if I go out there and I have 30 seconds, I try to give them the quick mechanical thing that they need, if they need it, a quick confidence boost, remind them who they are, remind them why they're out there, remind them that they're the toughest mofo on the field and that they deserve to be out there, and that kid in the box is pathetic and has no business even being in there. He's already out. He just doesn't know it. And then the last thing is strategic. So from a strategy standpoint, I made a mistake the other day. We were first and third, and two of our left-handed pitchers who both have very good moves and are very bright kids, they just like weren't picking off. And first pitch every time, guys were stealing. And I'm like, why? You have such a good move. Why aren't you just putting two and two together, pick over on the first pitch? Probably would have had one of those 4 stolen bases in that inning or two dead. But they didn't. And so finally I was getting a little irritated with it, and I'm like, all right, first and third, he's definitely going first pitch. I'm going to go out, have a quick visit, remind him that he needs to start picking off more and that they're going first pitch. But I was like, maybe he'll get it. Maybe he'll do it this time. No, he didn't. Stole first pitch successfully, second and third. So a lot of times I firmly believe in letting them make the mistake themselves. We also had a first and third situation where the tying run was on third, and we really couldn't throw through. And I really didn't want to give signs to my catcher. I wanted him to know. I thought it was a relatively obvious situation that he shouldn't probably throw through, because if you catch him 30% of the time, which would have ended the inning because there were 2 outs, the other 2/3 of the time we allowed the tying run to score. And even if we cut that throw off, it's unlikely that we're going to get him at the plate. So really that was the time for the snap throw to third base, or just a fake to second or whatever. And I was going to get the sign, or I was going to give him the sign, yell out to him, and then I couldn't get his attention. So I was like, you know what? Let's see what he does. And he threw through. Guy scored. Okay. And we talked about it. So at the end of the day, we still won that game. Didn't hurt us, whatever. It very easily could have, but at the end of the day, some of that strategic stuff, you have to let them make the mistake and then correct them afterwards. But there's a lot of times where you can't, and it's my job to go out there and remind them, hey, we need to pick off more, or hey, it's second and third. Remember, you can't give this guy a pitch that he can easily hit, because you got 2 outs, second and third, you have a base open. So it's probably start him off either with something on the back of the plate or a changeup, something he's not looking for. This is a off-speed and fastball count situation, or this is a only get beat with your best pitch situation, or this is a black on the outside, kind of the oh no situation, which is off, not on the plate. So having those little reminders, because they don't usually get those, is critical as well. So a lot of those meetings that I would get in my last 3-4 years were just like, hey, like they're not gonna like I know how to pitch, but they're like, hey, just reminder, this guy hits breaking balls pretty well. Don't forget. So we got second and third, got a base open, hits breaking balls pretty well. So I know you go to your curveball a lot, but this might be the situation where we stick fastball, changeup, or whatever. So just little scouting report stuff, little game stuff that maybe when you're in the heat of the moment, even when you're a really smart player, you just overlook. So it's just a double check to make sure we're all on the same page, and that stuff is important too. So I think a lot of times in youth baseball, the only reasons we have mound visits are mechanical or confidence. And those two are critical, and those cover a lot of the stuff, but the strategic aspect of it is important too, because there's just a lot of different things you can do when you have a base open, or a hitter's tendencies, or whatever, and we need to make sure we're all on the same page, pitcher, catcher, coach, so that we can execute our plan for that hitter and that inning and go from there. So again, that's kind of my idea of a mound visit. Sure, there's lots of ways to do it. Obviously, they're brief. Obviously, it needs to be actionable information. Obviously, it shouldn't tear a pitcher down. So going out there and harping on things they've already done is not going to help whatsoever. The goal is to give them a fix that they can easily do. Give them and one thing, not something that's a bunch of stuff that's going to be floating around their head, making them confused. You can't say, oh, you got to do this and you got to do that and you got to do this, you got to do that. One thing they can fix right away easily with little mental effort. One or two confidence things, just get them back to who they were, get them excited about themselves, get them confident and ready to compete and fight against that hitter and that mitt. And then lastly, the strategic aspect, if there is one. Sometimes there's not, sometimes there is, but talk through it if there is something. Just make sure, don't take for granted, because even I still take for granted that they'll probably do the right thing. Sometimes they just need a reminder. And the emotions and the heat of all that stuff, all that makes your brain foggier, and it makes it tougher to remember some of the stuff. It's a big checklist of information a pitcher has, and you just take for granted that he's going to rifle through it properly each time.